Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this Thursday morning's webinar series. I'm Chloe Tetro. I'm the health coach here with Ready Care. And for, excuse me, this morning's session, we're going to have a look at the topic of resilience, what it means, what are the neurological processes involved in it, and how can we get to know it a little bit better to get us working with a bit more resilience, a bit more grit, as the wording seems to be around it, and what's involved in that, how it interplays with something we would touch on a lot in these webinar series, which is neuroplasticity. So as always, you guys, if you want to pop in any comments as we go along or any questions as we go, please feel free to do so. Otherwise, I am jumping in. So for today, as I said, resilience is the word. So what is it? What is it insofar as how does it affect our lives? How does it enrich our lives? So it's not just a psychological attribute, but it's really interwoven into neurological phenomenon, as I mentioned. So if we have a think about an athlete, a professional athlete, for example, that we would very much equate with the likes of resilience. Think of them having to face some setbacks. If you think of a parent, for example, navigating their own challenges, and even a manager at work, guiding individuals through kind of work-based personal goals, resilience really comes across as this kind of common thread in diverse scenarios. So in the realm of performance, for example, with regards athletes or professional players, it really takes center stage as an individual's goes through challenges, disappointments, hurdles, unexpected turns, things that are very, very ordinary when we're perfecting our craft, perfecting our skills. If you have a look at the likes of Michael Jordan, for example, and that's me showing that I'm a product of the early 90s, the basketball player, he would have faced lots and lots of failures, but used them as stepping stones to success. He's got a very, very interesting story, and it would look at his utilization of the brain's adaptability and that level of neuroplasticity. And another thing we would have touched on recently, which is quite interwoven with the world of sports coaching, sports performance, which is the growth mindset, that openness towards taking setbacks as learning opportunities. Also, I think in the world of sports, for example, they have it's very foundational to how they approach challenges. It's win or die almost, where there's a very powered motivation that drives athletes towards wanting to keep their eyes on the prize, so to speak. And a lot of language actually that would emerge from coaching would have emerged first in sports coaching. So even the field of coaching, which can be interwoven into managerial roles nowadays that we see kind of permeate into the workplace. Coaching as a craft, as a method, would have emerged very much from sports coaching, kind of late 80s, early 90s. You look at the likes of John Whitmore, for those of you interested in the kind of coaching field, it would have been taking a lot of high performers, athlete psychology, and seeing how do we systemize this into a method that can be applied to the ordinary everyday individual. And even prior to some of the scientific methods of imaging that we would see nowadays, there was this kind of felt practical understanding and knowledge of the likes of specific psychological and neurological tools that could be applied through language and through kind of shifting mindsets. So outside of the realms of sport, resilience would play a huge part in personal lives. So if you look at, we've just come out of a results season for parents that had people in there or kids in the leaving cert. So if you take a look at a student that's navigating those kind of pressures, academic pressures, or you look at, a single parent juggling multiple responsibilities, or anybody undergoing a kind of health and habit lifestyle transition, which is a lot of, you guys would have an interest in. In each of the scenarios mentioned, there's resilience serving as the kind of guiding principle that allows us to bounce back, persist, thrive, and face a lot of challenges. And of course, this would be all the more pertinent following the kind of post-COVID adaptation of understanding that when individuals are in a high stress, what's the acronym VUCA, volatile, uncertain, something, something, something. If somebody knows the other letters, they've just slipped my mind totally at the moment. How important it is to build that level of resilience that, failure does not equate personal failure, does not equate an attack on our personal beings, but rather it's opportunity. It's something that happens externally outside of ourselves that we don't have to kind of take on as, if I have not performed the task well, I must be a terrible person. I must be equal zero in my value and worth. So with from a psychological perspective, resilience is very closely entwined with our ability to manage stress and adversity. And it's that brain's neuroplasticity that empowers us to rewire our thought patterns, which would look at negative experiences or perceived negative experiences as opportunities for growth. We look at the concept, this particular concept, it really taps into the potential for our brain to adapt, reconfigure, and become better at facing stressors. So in this kind of talk for today, I will, it's been prepared. I'll focus more on the neuroplasticity aspect of it, but also the growth mindset of it, and how both of those interplay to really give us that level of grit, is that kind of word. So let's have a quick look at the mechanics involved. So as I'd mentioned, neuroplasticity, and for those unfamiliar with the term, neuroplasticity is the idea that, or the fact, I should say, that the brain is not set in stone. When we are a particular way, when we adapt and grow to think certain things about ourselves, about others, the world, and shape our belief systems around our abilities, other people's abilities, all of that information that we collate is very, very complicated. So we set a specific pattern to it. And because we're quite energy lazy, most of the time, when we're faced with a scenario, we'll go on our previous held patterns, beliefs about ourselves, others, and the world, and we utilize that to assess our current situation. And what that can seem like is, because we repeat the same patterns over and over in our thoughts, it can lead to behaviors that are quite similar. It can lead to outlooks on the world that are quite similar, but they're not set in stone. It's easier for us from an energy perspective to rely on old methodologies, tried and tested methodologies of approaching the world. But really, the brain is always capable of change. It's always capable of rewiring. And what I mean by rewiring is creating new networks that will form new ways of thinking, new ways of behaviors, and ultimately new beliefs about ourselves, the world, and others. So one of the kind of links to that is the growth mindset, which was a term coined by Carol Dweck, which I've mentioned already on this webinar series. And it's a mental framework that plays a massive part in fostering resilience. So it emphasizes the individual's ability for growth, and to have an understanding that talents and capabilities are not set in stone. And once there's that kind of understanding that, the word that she uses a lot to kind of linguistically trick people into understanding growth mindset is, instead of just going, I'm not good at this task, full stop, that's it, the end, I'm not going to even try. Even adding the word yet is a really, really powerful mental trick, where we go, okay, I have the capability of learning something. It's not set in stone. I don't have to judge myself on having, a finite amount of knowledge on something I may not necessarily have tried yet. So just adding that to our linguistic patterns, whether it be at home, at work, in performance, in sport, or whatever it may be, really opens up our capability for neuroplasticity. So the knock-on effect of that is our tendency and resilience towards setbacks becomes an awful lot easier to deal with, because, as I said, we're not taking our lack of capability towards a certain task as a reflection on who we are as a person. We're just going, well, of course, I'm not good at accountancy. I've actually never really tried, and when I have, if I was not really good at it, I just would have gone, well, I'm not good at this, I'm not doing it. So I wouldn't have developed the skill set. I wouldn't have learned the adaptabilities of neural processing that would lead me to learn a task better. Um, and the other little part that I'll chat about in more detail actually is the notion of grit, which is a disgusting word as far as I'm concerned to place on your psychological neurons, as gritty neurons. But it seems, because I guess like a lot of this evolves from performance based, and it's a very like, go get him, champ kind of attitude, or what's that Snickers ad with Mr. T? It's like grit. So the term was coined by Angela Duckworth, is her name, and she's a psychologist, and it's a vital component of resilience, and it represents an individual's perseverance and passion for long-term goals, which helps them to navigate obstacles and setbacks with more determination. And again, what we're doing here is we're leveraging the emotional draw that something really important will have for us, that'll cultivate this dopamine feedback loop, where ultimately something is important enough to us, something is going to get us really, really fired up to get all of that dopamine going. And dopamine basically is what will close the gap between wanting to do something and getting something done. And the more we flood our system with dopamine, the easier a task appears to be. And I would think of it in terms of like, if you've ever had a great idea for a business, right, and it's getting you really, really fired up, and you're explaining it to a friend, and you go, oh, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to partner with this organization and that person and this, and they start to go, oh, hang on a minute, that sounds great, but what about this obstacle and that obstacle? And all of a sudden, your brain is going, that's not an obstacle at all. What are you talking about? Don't rain on my parade. I can do this. So the more dopamine we have in our system, the greater our perceived ability to accomplish a task becomes, and the smaller obstacles and challenges appear to be. So it's really, really important when we're trying to cultivate that resilience, that grit, that we understand what is the passion for the long-term goal. How do we harness that really tasty wanting to do something dopamine energy to leverage our approach to setbacks? So let's have a quick kind of deeper dive into that resilience and grit. Beep, beep. Having my little banners matters, because I went a bit off there, but I'm back on the banners. So again, if you're using this for kind of low carb lifestyle, dietary lifestyle changes, it's not just about making the changes. It's this kind of transformative endeavor that requires commitment. It requires persistence. It requires you to, it's the example I always give, kick back the blanket when there's a very rainy day outside because you'd said you'd get to the gym early. So it's really, really understanding what is the mechanism at play. And you'll find in our talks, there's similarities tend to come up, because essentially we're quite simple creatures that are extremely complicated. We're quite simple in that for us to want to do something, for us to persevere, not only do we need that growth mindset, we need to extract our performance from our perceived sense of self. And that's a wordy way of saying what we do, our output and our performance is not who we are. And that might sound very obvious to some people and very like, whoa, hang on a second, to others. Certain people will really place value and worth on who they are as a person based on their output. I did well at the task, therefore I am a good person, I have value. Other people, to them, it's just the task. And actually, oftentimes when individuals have a trait of perfectionism, it can actually get in the way of them completing things, because they place so much of who they are, their worth, how others will see them, on completing something that is, it's never going to be the Magnus Opus. If you have a report to do for work and you're putting it off because you want it to be perfect, very seldomly will the golden buzzer be pressed and gold confetti will fall when you hand it in. And they go, my God, crying. I've never seen anything so beautiful in my life than this report. Ultimately, the better we are at extracting ourselves from this is who I am based on our output, the easier it'll become for us to do tasks, the more we will give ourselves a break when we're not particularly good at something yet, and the more adaptable we're going to be to learn new skills, because all of a sudden it's not an attack on who you are, it's actually just an opportunity to better yourself in something that matters to you. And linking the thing that matters to you to the task will drive the engine. That's the force that will go behind it. So it's kind of a little like grit and resilience are very, very symbiotic. They reinforce our ability to thrive when there are challenges. It'll be the mental fortitude that'll help you bounce back from setbacks, the resilience aspect, whereas grit gives us that stamina to persistently push forward when we have those two things, something that matters hugely and the ability to face it with growth mindset. If you have a look at J.K. Rowling, for example, like she's massively popular for the Harry Potter series. Before she became this kind of overnight success, quote unquote, she was rejected numerous times, had multiple setbacks, and it was the adversity and the resilience that helped her to actually keep going. You know, somebody else might go, jeepers, I wasn't meant to be a writer. You know, and if you're able to leverage setbacks, knowing that something is worthwhile to you, and you're able to go, look, it's just not my time yet, those are your best allies for cultivating resilience and grit. So from a goal perspective, if we look at it in terms of how do you harness that even more? There's a talk I might actually recommend for you guys. It's a TED talk by Kelly McGonigal. So that's McGonigal, and it's called How to Make Stress Your Friend. And she looks at how to embrace that stress aspect, without kind of going totally off the wall, as a natural response, and viewing it as a positive through a positive mindset, which can help the kind of physiological response to a task and the overall health of the individual entering into a stressful environment. It really aligns with that look at resilience as it helps you to be better equipped with stress and transform it into an opportunity for growth. So with regards things like dietary lifestyle transitions, adopting low carb lifestyles, fitness, even if there's other goals that you have, research has shown that resilience can act as a protective factor when individuals embark on changes. So the ability to bounce back from these setbacks, stay committed to the new habits, manage cravings, get yourself by, you know, leaping out of the bed in the morning on that rainy morning. Studies have explored that connection between resilience and things like weight management, things like task performance, is individuals with that cultivated open mindset, growth mindset, and linking to a goal that helps to drive that resilience and grit forward, they achieve much greater long-term results. So little practical solutions for you, and I'm always trying to pack so much into these, so I'm skipping sometimes. So if you do have questions along the way, give me a shout, because I'm trying to give as best a world tour of what these things are. So if I'm ever omitting things that you want a bit more information on, don't hesitate to pop it into the old comment section. So in kind of conclusion to what we're looking at for today, it's an effective technique to actually help with this, and I come back to this quite often, is mindfulness, which has been shown to help with neuroplasticity. And as I always say, mindfulness does not need to mean sitting in the lotus position, amming. If that's not you, that's not you. It's just about bringing attention and awareness to what's currently happening with no judgment, trying to quiet the mind and actually seeing what is happening in the body, especially when you're in the middle of a bit of a stress response, especially when you want to give up something because you've attached it to your individual identity. When you're getting quite peaked, mindfulness is very good at going, okay, what is going on here? What am I actually getting stressed about? Okay, this has brought this feeling up for me, which is making me behave in this way, which is getting in the way of my task. So really cultivating whatever that looks like for you, whether it be 5 minutes a day, 1 minute every hour where you check in with yourself. It's a really, really good way of course correcting before things kind of spiral out of control. You're doing it as a way to get ahead of yourself, knowing that you are a fallible human being. I'm sorry, we all are. And that it merits you checking in with yourself, because our emotions and our thought patterns that have been previously established are very, very strong dictators of our behavior. So if we're very serious about wanting to adopt new behaviors, we need to check in with our old patterns. We need to check in with our emotions as they're going. Bringing in that growth mindset, bringing in that knowing that, I gave the example before when we looked at the growth mindset in greater detail, is you would not chastise a child for not knowing long division at the age of 5. It's just outside of the realm of what they have currently learned. It's not been ingrained in them. Similarly, it's very unfair as grown children for us to be very, very hard on ourselves when we judge our performance on something that falls outside of the realm of mastery of our task just yet. And that might seem very, very simplistic, but actually it's something that we can be very, very hard on ourselves throughout, which negatively impacts our behavior and our experience of a task and our willingness to approach it again, which can make growth in any kind of sector, personal life, performance, whatever it may be, incredibly difficult if we're already shutting down the door of it. So that's kind of my little tour for today. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you very much for having a listen as to what resilience is. And it's thrown about very, very much at the moment. But basically, it's as simple as knowing that you want to continue with a task, knowing that it's worthwhile the pursuit, knowing that you are going to be uncomfortable with it, and it's going to bring up an edge for you. It's going to bring you past your edge of comfort into discomfort, and knowing how to be more comfortable with that as you go through. So that's me for today, guys. Thank you very much for tuning in. Any questions, comments, always welcome. Otherwise, that is me for today. Have a lovely rest of your week, rest of your day, and practice resilience if it makes sense for you today. Practice checking in with yourself, even 1 minute. I promise it makes the world of difference. Right. Have a nice day, guys, and we will see you next week. Bye now.